So we've talked about that form maybe might be considered aesthetic, and functionalism is its own kind of principle. And thus the saying, form follows function. When you're designing a building, how do those two interplay in your design process?
Form and function?
Yeah.
Great question. I don't think there's not a simple answer. That's a complicated process, and yet it's very clear, or at least it's become very clear to me, the process of doing that. In fact, it brings up an interesting conflict in normal thinking. We've been told, time after time after time that form follows function. And it's by itself, it's a beautiful term. It's absolutely true. It's hand in hand with functionalism itself. The two go completely together. But the thing about form follows function, when you try to apply that to your design, you get lost quickly. It doesn't help you come to a final resolution, architectural resolution, because it isn't the whole story. The other, as far as I'm concerned, that's half of the story. The design, the other half is, strangely enough, something that's never acknowledged: function follows form. And that kind of a slogan would be treated as a violation of the sound principles of function, form follows function. And yet it's not. If you look carefully at the design process, one of the building design, one of the things you do is you intimately explore all the different kinds of functions that are supposed to take place in that building. Sitting at a desk, using the restroom, drinking from a drinking fountain, walking down a corridor, entering the building from the street, all these common, and there's hundreds of others. Making coffee. If you get very intimate with all the functions that are going on in that building, there's a lot of them, and they interweave, and they come into, they group themselves into categories, and they suggest form. If you look carefully at say an analysis of the function of cooking a meal in a kitchen, you can almost, after you've looked at it carefully enough, you can almost construe that the much of the way that the kitchen needs to be in order to facilitate all those functions. Certain ceiling heights, certain floor materials, certain counter heights, locations of various things, and so on. But that only goes so far. There's another part that I discovered in my design process that I would automatically learn to do without acknowledging it. And that was, I was making, I realized that I was studying process function. And I was wondering what kind of a form would please or satisfy that process. So I found myself exploring form. I would think of maybe, say, a pyramid, a geometric form. And I would see how that pyramid would work with these processes. Well, almost, but not quite. Then I would try maybe a cone, and maybe that might work. Also, I ran into the fact that most processes are not simple enough to be a good fit for a single form. And I started considering multiple forms, 2, 3, 4 forms merging together. But then I got to thinking, the first thing that came to me is about doing this. So now what I'm doing is I would call function follows form. I'm looking at form first and making a proposal of that form to the function and just seeing if there's agreement there. And So, but what I was doing, and what I had to do soon thereafter, was I had to admit that each form has its own nature, uh, and you can ruin a form easily by compromising its integrity. And there's that word again. Okay, any geometric form has its own integrity that it demands, and if you violate that, then you spoil your choice of form. Now you've got a compromised form that is clumsy, distorted, and almost like an insult. You've insulted the nature of this thing. So you have to, like for example, a pyramid. You have to explore the nature of these forms, and like a pyramid, for example, one that has a square base has 4 equal sides, and then 4 equal tapered sides, an apex at the top. And if that's a space inside, then that apex at the top makes a special spot in the interior of the middle of that floor, and then 4 equal sides around it. Well, that, in order for that form to be appropriate to your function, the function ought to be happy with those circumstances. If not, then choose a different form. Another thing you can do, by the way, is, believe it or not, function can be negotiated. There's different kinds of ways to function. For example, a kitchen to prepare food. There's different ways to do that, and one way may be more appropriate to a given form than another, and so there's this negotiation that takes place. But in addition to the nature of the form, there's what I call the personality of the form, and that adds depth and complexity and more opportunity to the design process for a fit between form and function. So personality would mean, let's say one form could be large and one form could be small. Well, those are 2 different personalities. One form could be what I call extroverted, which means it has glass, so lots of glass and lots of interaction with the outdoors. And again, remember the purity of the original form, like a pyramid. If you have glass on one wall, if you have it on the wall, it's got to be glass on all 4 walls. You've got to obey the purity of that form, or discard it if it doesn't work for you. Another personality trait would be introverted, where it's got no windows, it's withdrawn, and it's some very private thing happens inside there. That's a completely different thing, but that's a personality trait that can add truth and opportunity to your process. Another is a thing. Well, I mentioned large and small, but there's tall and short too. That's another area of variation. And another is a thing that I call celebration, where some forms can be treated with a lot of pizzazz, you might say, because perhaps it's housing a function that is exciting and dramatic. And so that would call for a dramatic treatment, which might be, say, if we're back to the pyramid, some kind of a skylight at the top, some treatment at the 4 different corners, special treatment of the, and that those kind of things that add richness and delight to the experience of using them. It goes on from there. If you've got, like I say, rarely do you have a single form that is fully appropriate to a simple functioning, although you can get that to happen sometimes. Too often you'll find that you're going to need more than one form in order to properly facilitate a normal complexity of functions. And so then you get into which form goes with which. Is it like a cylinder and a cuboid, I think is the word for a rectangular boxy thing, or a cylinder and a pyramid might work, or all three might work. And you might have your categories of functionings might group themselves into groupings that one would be appropriate to be introverted and in an ordinary kind of a form. Another would be appropriate to be extroverted in a celebrated kind of a form. And another might be somewhere in between in a large or a tall form. So that would be how you would group that. And then the next challenge, one of the final challenges there, is to find ways for these three forms to come together in harmony. And there are places on each form that are universally receptive to another form's intrusion, interaction. And it's important that you determine those areas and then merge these forms together, and you now have a result, and that result has to be functional. If your functioning still has to be the bottom line purpose. And so you have to do all of this always with an eye for the functioning of what goes on inside.